Hey everybody, welcome to the Monday Unmadness. I am your host, Marissa Krupa, and I'll be sharing with you on the topic of bias. I'm so excited to see so many people registered because it is really an intense topic. We're going to be talking a lot about awareness and bringing awareness to this concept of bias. And I'm really glad because, like, I'll tell you what, when I made this presentation at the SHRM conference, the Society for HR Managers, a couple weeks ago, I was really nervous. And even talking about it on a screen where, like, I'm detached from everyone, I'm really nervous because it's not a comfortable topic. So I really want to just like applaud you straight away for even showing up and being here today. Well, let's get into it. All right. So we're talking about how biases can impact the bottom line and then what you can do about it. Now let me see here. I'm losing my things here. So I need to figure out how I can move forward. This is a new way for me to do this. And let's go here. Okay. All right. If you've never been here before, then you may not know who I am. So I'm Marissa Krupa, and I specifically focus on helping mid-career women with their career transition. But when I work with businesses, I am a leadership coach, and I specifically target the hidden revenue that most businesses are missing out on, and by building really inspired hiring and retention practices. And what sets me apart from other consultants is that I have a background in mindfulness and somatics. And so by getting into our bodies and building awareness, we have a higher likelihood of achieving the goals that we set out to achieve. Let's talk a little bit about what bias is. I like to start with the definition of bias, and that is from Merriam-Webster, an inclination of temperament or outlook. I like this because it's just an inclination. It doesn't mean that it's set in stone. It doesn't mean that it's forever. It's just a tendency. And so if I break it down a little bit further, these are some synonyms that we have around the word bias: prejudice, tendency, partiality, proclivity. Now, in your mind's eye, think about how we see these words in our media, our social media, and in conversation. They tend to have a negative or positive connotation. So, in your mind's eye, if you want to jot down on a scrap paper, uh, how do you view these words? Like prejudice is kind of the kicker, right? Like we normally see that in a negative way, but really it's a type of inclination or of temperament. So if we go even further, how I like to define this is by by calling it a discernment or a judgment. And that's a very natural human thing to do, to discern things. You know, when we were living in caves, we wanted to make sure we didn't get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger. So we made a discernment, like, is the tiger hiding behind that bush? No? Okay, great. I'm going to walk over there. For example, like, if I discern that I don't want to walk down a dark alley at night to get to my car, that's a great discernment. If I repeat that discernment again and again because it kept me safe and I am alive today, then that becomes a bias that's pretty healthy. So, bias isn't about always being bad or wrong. It's really how it's used, the context of it, and it's kind of our natural process of being a human. But there are certain scenarios where we can get into trouble with it, and we're going to start exploring some of those. Okay, imagine you are a hiring manager or an HR professional, and you put out a job application. You get three resumes, and out of those three, one really stands out. Like they have all the experience you want. They have, all the education qualifications, like all the things. and you really want to interview them. But then you look back at the top of the resume and you realize, oh, wow, this person has a really complicated name. And it's maybe from a culture that I'm not part of. I don't really know if they're a Mr. or a Ms., or maybe they're neither one of those, but I can't tell by the way their name is on their resume. And so then you kind of set it aside and you're like, well, I'll get back to it. But then you move on to the other candidates. You get, and then you get a call from your boss like, hey, did you get those interviews scheduled yet? We really got to get this role filled. You're like, oh my gosh. And then you go and you get those other candidates interviewed. And before you know it, you've picked one and they're fine. But then all of a sudden you look at your desk and you're like, oh, wait, but I totally forgot to call that other person with the complicated name. Is this a bias? Yeah, it is, especially if you repeated it again and again, right? Now, there may be a lot of reasons as to why you why you kind of were, concerned about that. So let's talk about a concept that a lot of people don't want to talk about in business, and that's fear. So why would you have maybe been afraid to um, contact that person with a complicated name? And since this is not an interactive thing, you can put them in the chat, some of your fears. Here are a couple of suggestions and things that people shared in the talk at the conference. One of them was, well, we know that the community that we serve, because we're a healthcare organization, would not want someone with a complicated name or of such a different culture in the community as a healthcare provider. That was really hard to hear. And boy, I gave that person a lot of credit for having the courage to say that in front of a large group. But the fact is, he knows his audience, right? His audience is the community they serve. Could his organization take a healthy risk and hire a healthcare professional with a complicated name? Yes, absolutely. Right? But there was fear, there was concern, there was backlash. They were afraid of the pushback by the community members. That's legitimate. What it really boils down to is a fear of looking like a fool, of not being competent. And so you can imagine, especially as an HR professional, if you are one, you're also representing your business, not just yourself, right? So there's always a desire to look competent. And if you garbled their name and they took offense and then they complained or something like that, or if you call them a Mr. when they're really a Ms., they may take offense. Or if you call them a Mr., but they're really a they, and you didn't know, and then they file a complaint against the company, that's all stuff we don't want. That's all stuff we are trying to avoid. But what is fear really? It's false evidence appearing real. This is really just all in our heads, right? And the things that we are afraid about, most other people are not afraid about because they have their own fears. What fear of false evidence appearing real is really about is just a lack of experience. Did you have a lack of experience saying that complicated name on that person's resume? Sure, of course. How we overcome a lack of experience is we try new things. What if you had approached calling that person, and instead of saying, hi, Mr. or Ms. So-and-so with the name you can't pronounce, picking up the phone, and when they answer, you say, hey, I am so-and-so from such and so company, and I'm wondering if you can help me out. We got your application, but I am struggling to pronounce your name and I don't want to butcher it. Can you say your name for me so that I can say it properly? What's going to happen if you did that? Well, the person's going to think, oh man, like they're human, they're real. They're authentic. They asked for help. This is the kind of company I want to work for. And they're going to probably say something like, oh, no worries. I get that all the time. It's a tricky name. You pronounce it like blah, blah, blah. And then they help you. And then you move on and you book the interview. And as you set that interview up, you then coach the hiring manager and the other people. This is how you pronounce their name. And you get over it, right? But you tried something new as a way to get that person in the door to interview someone who could be incredibly well qualified. This other one is face everything and rise. I really, really like this one because it's a signal to our nervous system that we have room to grow. Back in the caveman days, when we were talking before about, saber-toothed tigers, we had a certain nervous system that kept us alive. We had a type of vigilance. We were able to discern, make judgments, all the things. Well, we still have the same nervous system. Like, it takes bajillions of years for species to evolve. And so nowadays we don't have those same kind of threats, but when we feel our nervous system activated, it's really just an opportunity for growth. It's an opportunity for us to change, to look at something a new way, to view something with a different mindset. And that's really what fear is. It's just another mindset. And mindsets can be overcome. So let's explore about what this looks like in an organization and get to some brass tacks and numbers. When McKinsey came out with their study, now I've heard it say it was 2024 and then 2025. I don't know when it was, but it was a couple years ago. And they come out with this every so often, every so many years. And in the most recent study, they said that women and people of color in a VP or higher role will produce 39% higher revenues for that company than an equivalent competitor that has no or less of women or people of color in the leadership roles. And so I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty good to me. Now, what they also discovered in this particular study, though, is that most women and people of color get stuck in middle management. They struggle to get into those leadership roles. And then because they're great workers, they have more and more pressure from the bottom, from getting more work, more teams, more management. But then the top is not supporting them. And they eventually give up and drop out of the workforce. And then what happens is the company, even if they want to try to take advantage of this 39% higher revenues, they can't, because they have less and less people in those groups to promote into those leadership levels. So then it becomes a type of self-fulfilling prophecy. Let's look at another set of numbers. In 2015, the World Economic Forum did an analysis of studies, and they found that they projected that by today, so 2026, so this is now 11 years later, that if your company had at least 25% of women in those executive leadership positions, your profit margins would be at a 16% higher level than executive teams at 16%, meaning 10% higher than executive teams with no women. I don't know about you, but I think these are great, and I would like to have these in my business, right? Well, what was the secret sauce? What made these numbers happen? And essentially, what all the studies boil down to is new and different perspectives. When you have new and different perspectives in your leadership team, then the response to the market forces, it's more agile, it's more resilient, it's more flexible, it's more creative. And that's what produces the higher profit margins. Alrighty, now we're going to get into some movement. And this is all optional. You don't have to do it. I will share with you both a standing version and a seated version. And before we go into this, I want to do a couple things. So today I'm going to take a little extra time for us to focus on what we really feel after each movement, what you feel emotionally, what you feel in your body. Because then as we go through the rest of this program, I'm going to be prompting you. What do you feel after hearing this information? Like, where is that in your body? And I'm going to help you to build awareness in real time. And you'll start to see that this awareness building is what's going to help you with a concept we're going to talk about in a little bit. I always offer people to start with a 1 to 10 scale. 1 is, this is the worst day of your life. 10 is, this is the best day of your life. What is your number for today in this moment of now? Your emotions, your physical, your mental. What is your number? Don't think about it too hard. You can jot it down, or you can remember it if you have a great memory. And then we'll go into our movements. Okay, let me pause this. All right, here I am. Okay, so if you want to use a stool or a chair, what you do is you sit on the edge of it so you get as much of your tush onto the edge of the chair so that you can have a nice erect spine, and then you can do all the movements. All right, that's how we do it on a chair. And then on the standing side, for the first one, it's called grandfather's coat. Imagine that you have a big long coat on and the sleeves are dragging all the way to the floor. Gently twist your torso side to side, leaving your arms slack. Nice, easy breaths, waking up the spine. Great, and pause this movement. And right now, just feel any differences in your body. Are there any sensations? Do you have any emotions? If you have an emotion, can you feel where it lives in your body? Awesome, everybody. Next one, feet are hip distance apart. Inhale your arms up. Clasp your hands together like this. And then exhale, tilt to the side. Inhale up to center. Exhale, tilt to the other side. Just go as far as you can on either side. Try not to let your shoulder drop down. Stay in one plane. Find your own rhythm. Inhale at center. Exhale to the side. Let's do at least 2 more on each side. Wherever pace you're at is fine. I can see in my video that I can go a lot farther on one side than I can on the other. And that's because I'm nursing a little bit of an injury on one side, and that's okay. All right, last one. Inhale at center. Exhale, side. Inhale at center, and this time reach your arms all the way up, 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 and exhale, release down. Again, pause, breathe your natural breath. What do you feel in your body? Maybe you feel nothing, that's okay. Do you feel any emotions at this moment? If you do, where do they show up in your body? Okay, last one. I'm going to adjust the camera here a minute so you can see my arms better. Feet hip distance apart. Inhale your arms up. Palms touch. Exhale, press your palms away from you. Press, press, press like you're pressing the air away, and exhale. 2 more times. Inhale up. Exhale, press away. Last one. Inhale up. Exhale, press away. Great. Stand and breathe. What do you notice? I notice a lot more openness in my chest and in my arms and shoulders. I notice I'm calmer, which is great because I was nervous to talk about this topic. And I notice that my mind feels clearer. Those are my noticings. That's really what awareness is. When we talk about awareness building, we do it by noticing our direct experience. Because when we notice our direct experience, and in the case of like a bias situation, we may notice, what that person said just kind of hit me rough. Like my heart didn't like that. But if we're going so fast and our nervous system is amplified and we don't take time to pause, we're not even going to notice that our heart might have had a response to a bias statement that somebody shared, right? So this is how we start to combat it. I should say deal with it. Combat is kind of a hardcore word. All right, let's keep going. Let me share. Okay, now let me get back to the screen so I can get to all the things. Okay. Why are biases hidden? What makes them so unconscious? Well, there's a lot of reasons, and I'm going to tackle only a particular one today because it's incredibly impactful. And that involves the concepts that I shared in the post on Saturday about Jackson Katz and his concept of the bystander. And he developed this around the domestic violence world, I guess you could say. There's a lot that gets reinforced in our language that helps to keep biases hidden. So what he did, this is Mr. Katz, and he has been doing this work since the 1990s. His company is called MVP Strategies. And he developed this around the concept of the focus in the area of why, when we talk about domestic violence, we always focus on the victim, on the woman, and we kind of blame the victim and make it about her instead of the perpetrator, which most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time are men. And so he described it like this. This came from a feminist linguist named Julia Penelope. And in his TED Talk, so I highly recommend you going back to that post and watching his TED Talk. It is so powerful because he really shifts the paradigm of how we look at these types of problems. And we can apply this to the bias problem also. He started out with a sentence: John beat Mary. This is a clear English sentence. Subject is John, verb is beat, Mary is object. And then he said, but when we shifted into the passive voice, Mary was beaten by John. He said in his lecture, now it's like John is about to fall off of our psychic plane. He's at the end of the sentence. And suddenly Mary is at the beginning of the sentence, and now we're focusing all on her. If we continue to focus on her, we drop John off altogether. Mary was beaten. Now, in the domestic violence circles, beaten women are called battered. So now we change it to Mary was battered. And then if we continue to focus on Mary, because John is now completely gone and out of the picture, it becomes Mary is a battered woman. And now she's been labeled. She has a box put around her. Even if she doesn't want to be in that box, others in the field of domestic violence prevention and different things will keep her in that box. And everything is about Mary. John has completely disappeared. He's gotten off scot-free and nobody's talking about John. But John was the person who beat Mary. Where did he go? And why aren't we focusing on him? So this is a type of paradigm shift that Mr. Katz is talking about. Now let's put it into a boardroom example, okay? You've got multiple people, genders, ethnicities, all different things in a boardroom situation. How can we apply the same linguistic logic? Mary's making a presentation or she's making a point about something, and John silences Mary. He says something to her that causes her to just completely shut down. Now, one of the reasons why she's shutting down is because if she speaks up, and this is the double standard that a lot of people don't want to admit to, but it is real. I've lived it myself. If she speaks up, she's now considered a witch, right? She's a witchy person. And she's like, and people say, well, why couldn't she just, take it on the chin? She's not a team player. Why can't she just take the feedback, right? But then if she says nothing, Mary was silenced by John. So now, again, the focus is still on Mary. John is more and more starting to move out of the picture because really John is just being one of the guys, right? He's just doing what guys do. So now Mary was just silenced. And she continues to sit there in silence because she knows that if she tries to speak up, then no matter what she says, she's going to be looked down upon as being not a team player. She can't handle feedback. She's too sensitive. Her skin isn't thick enough. All that double standard crap, pardon my language. And so now Mary becomes a silenced woman or a silenced worker. But here's the difference in the boardroom culture. Suddenly, there's something wrong with Mary. And if you think about it, and I recall meetings in boardrooms around the teams that I was part of, This sort of thing happened all the time. It even happened to me, where I was targeted as there was something being wrong with me because I spoke up about something or because I didn't speak up to defend myself or whatever. Um, and so this type of thing happens all the time. So now we can kind of see that through just language alone, and this is what Mr. Katz talked about, is that this is how dominant paradigms reinforce themselves and stay in power. Because it's not just about institutional structures or decision making, but it's permeated through language. And this is how then John gets a promotion and Mary doesn't, right? This is how Mary doesn't get into that VP role, okay? Because of these types of very subtle perceptions. And now it's all about Mary and her response or her lack of response, but nobody is addressing John. Why did John say what he said? Why did he say it in such an aggressive way that really shut Mary down? Nobody's talking about John. He's gone. He's off scot-free. He's just doing what guys do, right? This is kind of a serious deal here. So before we actually move on, let's just pause for a second, because this is a really intense, concept. And so let's just breathe. I'm going to see if I can pause this. Just breathe. What are you feeling when you hear this type of concept? What emotions are happening for you? Where you feel it in your body? For me, I feel a tightness in my throat because I get mad. Because I remember the times when this happened to me, and I get mad that it's still happening. So let's just be with that for a minute. This is how we break through it, by becoming aware. All right. Now, let's go on to talking about bystanders. So what Jackson Katz also did, and what MVP Strategies also does, is he created from other researchers who really started to develop this when they started tackling bullying in middle schools in the 1990s. And there was a lot of research about this. And so he came up with this concept of the bystander. It was actually come up by other people, but he really brought it into the forefront of domestic violence prevention. And so what a bystander is it's everyone. It's male or female, it's or non-binary, it's all ethnicities, it's all ages, it's every single person. And the way he couched it is that every single person knows a woman, right? So you have a daughter or a sister or a mom or an auntie or all of those things. And so when we said, okay, when we talk about this in the framework of a bystander, it transcends the victim perpetrator duality. Because think about it, if you are let's say you're a male person and you're watching this, and people are now kind of putting you into a category or a box of like, oh, well, as a male, you're probably going to commit a crime. As a male, you're probably going to hit a woman. As a male, da 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 da. Well, what's going to happen? Your back's going to go up and you're going to be like, yeah, F this, I'm not talking to you. Like, no, I'm a good person. I would never do that. And so what happens is it causes the perpetrator group to shut down. It causes that perpetrator group to perpetuate the dominant paradigm so that they don't have to be confronted because they don't want to be. Nobody does, right? But by being a bystander, then it's like, oh, wait, I'm not in that perpetrator group. I'm just a person. And I can start to, call out, and we'll talk about how to do this later, call out behaviors or attitudes about this and be that ally that people talk about all the time, right? I can be the ally, and I can, because I'm not being shoved into the perpetrator box. Okay. So what this does when people are good bystanders and they call people out on their behavior or their language, it starts to change social norms. And what Mr. Katz talked about is that then the community becomes self-monitoring. And just by people wanting to be included in their peer group, they will shift and change their behavior when they know that that behavior or that language is no longer acceptable. And they only can really do that when they're called out on it by their peers in a way that is empowering and graceful and not tearing them down. Because if you tear them down or you shame and blame, the person's going to shut down and they're not going to change. Okay. So let's explore this a little bit more. Here are some examples. A great example was when I had a coworker when I was working at the state in one of the education departments. And she told me the story about how she was working in an after-school program and some new kids had come in like halfway through the year. I guess they were new to the school or whatever. And the kid was, mouthing off or saying something or bullying or saying something obnoxious. And while they were doing a group activity, and she just walked by and she put her first two fingers on the desk of that student and just said, "We don't say things like that here." And then she kept walking. And the student totally got it. He changed what he was saying and he became integrated into the group. Because when he came into the group, he was scared, right? We talked about fear. And so he's trying to kind of throw his weight around and like trying to act like he was cool. And all the other students were looking at him like, "You're not cool, dude." But because not every student can speak up about stuff like that, she was able to step in and say, "We." So when you are talking about somebody's biased communication or behavior, use "we." We don't say that here, or we don't approach people like that here, or even more positive, on our team, we really lift each other up and we really support each other, and feedback is always welcome. And we couch it in terms of how they can improve, not how they were awful. And so be very specific and clear, but use "we" so that they're not feeling targeted, shamed, or blamed. If you're in a meeting, it's not always wise to target somebody in a meeting and to call them out, even with a "we." People are going to feel like they're put on the spot. I know I certainly have been and felt this way. Pull them aside after the meeting. But we also want to make sure, and I'll talk about this in a minute, that it's the right timing. But again, calling out somebody in a meeting most of the time will fall flat. And then again, you're looking like you're an aggressor or that you're not a team player or whatever. So instead, what we should be doing is, and this, I missed this. If you are going to be speaking out at a meeting, let's go back to John and Mary, right? John said something kind of harsh to Mary. Mary was silenced. And I might say, "Hey, John, I appreciate your concern. And also, I really want to hear what Mary has to say because I know she put a lot of research, time into this research, and I really would like her to get to her findings. So I acknowledge your concern. Let's park that for a minute because I want to hear the rest of what she has to say." So I used "I" and then I used "let's." So that's another way to help in the meeting environment. If you're with your peers, saying things like, "Hey, that's not cool," like everybody wants to be cool, this is especially important for guys. So Mr. Katz talks about this a lot, like on his social media videos, you'll see like when you're in a group of guys and a guy says something really negative about women, just say, "Hey man, that's not cool." And then use the "what if." What if that was your daughter? Would you say that about your daughter? What if that was your mom? Would you say that about your mom? And I love how you use the word "mom" because that really usually gets guys to laugh because like, "Oh yeah, I would never say that about my mom." Well, if you'd never say it about your mom, why are you saying it about that woman walking down the street? What if she's a mom? Like, wouldn't you want to respect her just like you respect your mom? You see what I'm saying? So when you're in peer groups, those are some great suggestions. And then also, and I use this one myself. So I was working with the property manager some years ago, and there were some people moving from out of state, and they were kind of desperate to find a place. And it also turned out that it was a couple, and they were pregnant with their first child. And so you can imagine all the hormones and all the things. Well, they had put a deposit down on the house, my house that I own, and sight unseen and all the things. They get there, and then I guess a piece of something fell on the, whatever, and they thought it was a dead mouse, and it wasn't. It was like a piece of insulation. Anyway, they freaked out, and they're like, "We don't want him to live here. Oh, we'll have to figure something else out." So of course she calls me up and she's like, "Well, they've already signed, they've already given me the deposit, blah, blah, blah." And it was like, 3 or 4 days into the month. And she started to, and the property manager started to say, "Well, this woman is, one of those ethnicities," and blah, blah, blah. And she started, and I just said, "Hey, well, you know what? That's not even relevant. I don't care. I don't care what her ethnicity is. Doesn't matter. She's pregnant. They're stressed. They're moving. I'm not in the business of making people miserable. What's relevant is like if they hate the place, I don't want them to rent it. I want people who love the place to rent it. So don't worry about it. Just give them their deposit back, send them on their way. I would avoid renting anything to them because they're difficult, and let's just find somebody else." So I just nipped it right in the bud, and I let her know that like whatever the ethnicity of that woman was completely irrelevant, because it was completely irrelevant. So that's another really good one to try. I want to acknowledge that this stuff, it takes a lot of courage. And this is why we use awareness. This is why I've been asking you to stop and feel what you are experiencing. Like I mentioned just a moment ago, communicate with calm. That means not only yourself, but also the other person. Timing is everything. Let's say you had the meeting with John and Mary. You really want to talk to John about what he said to Mary and let him know that's not cool. That's not how we say things here. But after the meeting, you can see John is agitated or he's storming off because he's got another meeting he's got to go to or whatever. Don't approach him. Find another chance to say, "Hey, John, when do you have a minute to talk? I want to just check in with you about something." Look on his calendar, whatever. Then what if you leave the meeting and you're the one that's riled up? You're like, "God dang that John, he's so bullheaded and blah, 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 blah." Well, that's not a good time to talk to John either, right? Like you want to make sure you're calm too. Go back to your office and do some of the physical movements that we did earlier. That'll help you calm down. So go slow with this process. And also, I want to say that because of the, communication uh, options that were shared, even if you don't have full buy-in by your leadership team for this type of thing, that's okay. You yourself as an individual can start practicing this. Practice in your peer groups, practice at home in front of a mirror. I know that sounds crazy, but it really works. Especially like if you had a scenario in your workday, you come home and in your mind, you replay that scenario and ask yourself, what could I have said in that situation? And then practice saying it out loud. Imagine yourself back in that scenario and then say that thing out loud. And that's how you build courage up in yourself. So go slow. And then really, this requires a lot of internal, um, like self-love, for lack of a woo-woo term. Because here's the thing, you guys, when you start to be a good bystander and start to say things like this, again, with grace, with compassion, not shaming or blaming, and then also have the self-awareness for yourself to monitor yourself. Am I saying things like this? Am I acting like this? Right? You run the risk of being rejected by your peer group, and nobody likes that. And Mr. Katz talks about that fear of rejection as being one of the number one things why, especially for men, because he is a man, so he talks about that, why it's so hard for men to call each other out on stuff like this in their peer group. And it's interesting because men will kid each other and josh each other all the time. So you can also be a good bystander by using humor and using a joke. And that's a way to still get across to somebody, hey, what you said isn't cool. So build yourself up, love on yourself, understand that you're not always going to get it right the first time. You may try one of these techniques and it may come out all the way sideways and you may completely like blow up that relationship. I mean, hopefully not. But it's worthwhile. I'll tell you a quick story. I was doing Reiki work. I was advertising myself as a Reiki practitioner because I do have Reiki skills. And someone came to me, we did a session, and at the end, she said something about her daughter who was like 7 or 8 or something. And my response to her was like, your daughter has her own path. The best you can do is just offer as much guidance as you can. At the end of the day, you can't really control her. She's going to live her life, but you can love her and support her no matter what she experiences. So I said something like that. Man, that woman left in a huff. She was pissed. She did not want to hear me say that. But then guess what? She called me to book another appointment. And when she came back, she said, I really want to thank you. I was pretty like twerked after you said that thing at the last session. And then I thought about it and I realized you were right, that the best thing I can do is to love on her, and that the worrying about her life is not going to help her, but supporting her and loving her and giving her the skills so she can live a great life is the best thing I can do. And I was like, wow, thank you. So she came back around. So that's that building yourself up, right? Of understanding that you may say something and the person is really like Twitter-pated and pissed off. And then they'll sit with it for a minute and they'll come back around and they'll say, oh, wow, like that was something I actually needed to hear. So just know it's not always going to go perfectly every time you try it. Okay, last thing, because I know we're getting over time here. A gentle reminder, what is your why? Because really, the business community leads everything. I mean, think about what's all in our news. It's business profits, economy, Wall Street. Like, sure, there are news reports about like, children starving in the world and, all sorts of horrible things. But what do we mostly focus on? It's money. So think about what kind of world do you want to live in? If you create this world in your business, the rest will follow. The world will follow you. The community will follow you, because every time you hire somebody, you're hiring somebody who may be a parent, who then can pay their property taxes, at least in the US, fund their schools, their child gets a great education, their child grows up, becomes an excellent worker, and you've now built this whole, not even community ecosystem of positivity by your hiring practices. And by the fact that you have a business where you hire people and you pay them well to live a good life. So when you build the world you want in your business, everything else will follow. Thank you so, so much for being with me today. I am so grateful to you. And I'll be putting these into the chat. I think I need to, let me see now. I need to maybe stop sharing this. That's what I'm going to do. Stop sharing and go to the right place. So thanks for your patience. This was a different way for me to share the thing than I normally do it. And so here we go. And so here are ways to reach me. I wanted to let folks know that I did create this thing called a gender bias training guide. Let me see. In fact, I might be able to share the page with you. So going back here, going to another window, screen share window. Here we go. So if you go to this page, the link is in the chat, and you sign up, you will get the guide. It's an instant email into your inbox, and you can then get this leadership brief that I created. And it really goes into some case studies, specifically about gender bias, but again, this applies to all manner of bias. So there's case studies and examples of what others have tried, what's been successful, and then there's a step-by-step approach to how to bring this into your organization, whether it's training or whatever. But it really specifically talks about finding that champion to really champion the cause. And you can start to build that connection with a champion in your organization by using the communication tools and being a good bystander, like we just talked about. Okay, that's it for me. I'll see you in 2 weeks on June 1st. Thank you for watching. I hope that you found a lot of value in this presentation. And what's also in the chat is a way to get in touch if you are wanting more guidance on how to bring this into your organization. It's free, it's confidential, and get on my calendar and let's talk. And I'm happy to support you in whatever way I can. So thanks again, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Bye.